We're going to get started with Lightning Talks. So, quick introduction. My name's Kyle Casterline. Welcome, everyone, to the Hacker Dojo. Thanks for coming out tonight. So, I'll just do a quick overview of how Lightning Talks work, what they are, and then we'll just roll into it. So, Lightning Talks are a long-standing Hacker Dojo tradition. This goes all the way back to the days of the Super Happy Dev House. And it's essentially open mic night for all of the cool projects that everyone around the dojo has been working on. It could be a pitch on a company or a tech project or anything. Right now we've got a lineup of speakers. If anyone else wants to add their name to the list, come add your name to the board and then talk to Ishai and we'll get you lined up. So the way it works is every lightning talk is going to be 5 minutes. And then followed by a short Q&A. I'll have the mic. If anyone has questions, I'll hand it over and we can go around the room. And so we have a lapel mic here for any speakers who are going to be talking. Just put it on your collar and don't forget to take it off when you're done. All right, so the first speaker that we have lined up is Jorge. He's going to be talking about what is your next venture. Going for my new venture, yes. 5 minutes, right?
Yeah, and then it'd be excellent to meet you.
Yes, and for anyone in the back, make sure to be respectful of the speaker. Everyone's going to be having conversations. Take it into a side room. And there's beer. Can't forget about that.
Okay. Well, we're ready. I just came from Mexico for a long 1 month vacation. And I found that a lot of people has the purpose of starting a new venture, a new thing every year. That's the common things that happens. And I decided that started with a concept that said, how do you explore the entrepreneur world? A lot of people believe, and here we're in a group of people that usually we try to make it something new. But what is the pleasure of doing something first? Creating a new process, a new company, a new product is really a very, very strong challenge. And I say, how do you feel that and how you can learn it to be doing? One of the big problems for everybody is everybody saying, I don't have time. And the first problem of not having time, what happens? It's okay, I decide and I'm going to do it next month, and never happens. It's procrastination, is some way of having excuse. The second issue, sometimes the people say, I don't have money. And I say, okay, what about that? If you reserve in your schedule the 20% of your time, that means or you sleep less 20% of time, or you take some time from your job and doing something to create a new product. That if you decided to do that, for example, for the next 3 months, you have every day about 2 hours that you will be working for that new adventure. That is the very first thing that is very hard for the people to do it. And what happens in the third day? The third day, oh, I need to go for the kids, I need to jump into some meetings, and we start to delay it. Here, I say that this time, this 20% of time is like if you are with a heart attack, you cannot relink that time. You need to dedicate that time, whatever happens in your life. If you go in that sense, you start to do the first project, then you need to get some experience. And one of the very typical things is say, okay, I'm going to do my project, and I'm going to get together with my friends, and what happens? After 3 meetings, one of the things is you start discussing with people and you never move forward. The goal here is you need to think that if you work with people, you are a manager or you are a group, you forget how to do things by yourself. And the main challenge is, okay, you dedicate the 20% of your time and then you decide to be a solopreneur. How many of you are really willing and interested to do the first project, everything by yourself? And that is something that I have found here in the Hacker Dojo very common, that the people is doing in that way. But at the very end, you could be a freelancer, you do your job and your services to some people. A solopreneur, then a solopreneur is a person that runs a full business. That means do marketing, do development, do support, do everything. that maybe in the future you decide to go into an indie hacker. Indie hacker is a solopreneur that start doing something small and then start to bring people after you start moving forward. Or in the traditional way that we know about the entrepreneurship, that you get one subject matter expert and one guy that is able to sell everything to the world and put together, and that's the typical way that the entrepreneurship happens in the Silicon Valley. In that sense, the challenge here is how to focus, invest your 20% of your time and dedicate everything that you need to do. What advantage is to do everything by yourself? You start to focus in prioritizations, and that prioritization is how you are a CEO in a given moment, a support people in a given moment, a development in a given moment, and you learn and face it, all the decisions. You avoid to have conversations and negotiations about time, and you start doing, as a solopreneur, something that requires a very high level of discipline. You need to learn, and that is one of the third part, very important, the time boxing. You just say, for next Friday, I need to deliver these things. And usually, the worst person to put a very, very hard timeline for a project is ourselves. Usually, if we have a boss, the boss say, hey, for tomorrow I need to have that, and say, you are crazy, but anyway, you do it. Why you don't do it by yourself? That is one of the things. And in that sense, how you do that, how you should do it, how you go for all the process of ideation, research, writing, editing, publishing, validating, and you go all around that. And this, I just to leave it that as a point, I created this diagram that is how you build the synergy to keep going all the time, over and over, and be successful. In that sense, I invite you to be a solopreneur to make your first challenge and get done.
All right, thank you.
Questions? Or no time for questions?
Yes. Yeah, go ahead.
Nobody has questions? So everybody's a solopreneur here? Yeah. So far, it's that's a way to be going, and that is a different approach. It's not crowdfunding, it's not venture capital. It's you are the investor in yourself. Some other questions, points?
I'm just curious, are you working on anything right now? Or do you have anything cool that you have planned up?
No, I am right now, since I just came from vacation, I'm going to dedicate a solopreneur to build that as a program and invite people. I'm going to launch that within a couple of weeks or 3 weeks, some programs to make it people learn how to do everything by themselves. And the first customers, I am myself.
Do you know any successful solopreneur?
I have done a lot of, in my past life, I built 11 startups, but all of them I developed with a group of people. And this is my first time that I'm going to do everything at the beginning by myself.
So what is your product?
The product here is how to create a training environment to teach people to be a solopreneur when they want to create the first endeavor or the first startup. That's the product.
All right, give Jorge a big round of applause. Okay, next up we have Pratul talking about his thoughts on ChatGPT.
Ooh.
Okay guys, so I'm a solutions architect and I work on cloud native apps, and like beginning of this year, I kind of started playing with ChatGPT. So I want to share my experience. And before that, just to give you a background, what I work as a contractor. So what it involves. So the first thing is basically I talk to the clients, and then they have some kind of products. So I build the architect, then we work on the document, and once both parties are okay, we will sign off on the document on what to do. And after that, I will look for some developers, typically 1 or 2 developers, and 1 or 2 DevOps guys, because I'm talking about the cloud native apps. So we need DevOps people for that. So then we develop a product, then we test it, release, then we build the release pipeline, and then we deliver the product. So typically it takes 4 to 6 months to build the whole product. And if I divide the timelines, what are the different partition of the whole 4 to 6 months. So the 30% time is just pure coding, and 50% of the time goes into hiring the people, developers, all these meetings and defining what to do. And once they do it, then I will review, and then iterations and documentation and so on. And finally, delivery takes about 20%. So I thought that let me try ChatGPT and see, it can improve this. So it was pretty spooky actually. I went to ChatGPT and I asked him, okay, create me a architecture for this IoT. So it gave me 4 or 5 lines, do this, these are the components. So I thought, okay, these are just text. Then I said, okay, create me the code for this. And it created the code, and that was a little surprising. And then it was like 90% of this code was correct. So now one more thing is that I have expertise only in one cloud. So I can write code for one cloud. And the DevOps engineers I hire are for the other clouds, because sometimes the client wants the code to work for the other clouds also. But then I asked ChatGPT if you can write a code for other clouds. So within 3 seconds it generated the whole pipeline. So I tried to do the whole working product, but I was not able to get basically the ChatGPT was busy, so I was not able to create the working product. But my estimation is that in future it can reduce the whole timeline to build the product is about 40 to 50%, and the number of people I have to hire is again about 50%.
Yes.
Yeah. So, yeah, that's about it. Any questions?
It is writing coding in what language? For Azure it is writing in.
So this is basically Terraform or CloudFormation or serverless framework. Yeah.
Oh, so you're saying you had pretty good success, say like writing a non-trivial Terraform config for say AWS, and you could
Yes,
say make it
yeah.
GCP, and it would do that?
Yeah, so what you do is you ask for a very simple architecture, right? So it will create a 3-tier architecture for you, and then you go in and you ask for insert a queue, right? It will do it. Then you ask for insert a load balancer, it will do it. Then you ask for auto scaling, it will do it. And then at the end you will be so scared,
How complicated do your prompts have to be? Because I do assume that there's a lot of detail. Like for me, a miniature Terraform config would be like 2 pages.
Yeah.
And you have to name a lot of things. Like even the auto scaling groups deserve names.
So I was not able to review the whole thing, but it was more or less 80 to 90% correct. And I think at the end of the day, I'm sure it was about 5 or 6 pages of YAML file.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Regarding ChatGPT, I noticed that, like you said, it's not perfect. You said it's about 90%, right? Is that because ChatGPT is from last year's model? Because it's, from my understanding, it's a 22 model, right?
No, I don't know any of those details.
Okay.
This was the first time I was
Okay.
playing with it, and I thought that it cannot do all these complex things, but it.
Because
was so surprising.
my next question was going to be, if somebody's trying to develop code that's current, would ChatGPT be able to know the current code in comparison to, because ChatGPT was timestamped last year, like a 3 months of data, right? Accumulated of 250 years of human knowledge, right? And that data is extracted from last year. But if you're working on new code now, would ChatGPT, and this is, I don't know the answer to this, so maybe somebody out there might know, would ChatGPT know the answer of it now, current code?
Even if it doesn't know, the differential is so little, because if I take my YAML files for last 3 years, they were fine. And again, this is about the orchestration of the components. I'm not talking about the real code inside the lambdas and all that. That you have to develop. That doesn't change, that's 30%. So it's the components and the orchestration of the components. Okay.
Right. Thanks.
Thank you.
Very good.
Okay, next in the lineup we have Darren on making something people want.
Hello, everybody. I'm Darren, and these buttons are really small. Wow, okay, there we go. I'm Darren. Currently, I'm a senior software engineer, but I've spent my career kind of at the intersections of not just development, but also design and product. And so today, I kind of want to talk about making things that people want. Of course, it's here on the podium, but it comes up in conversations that I've had here all the time, and having recently moved to Silicon Valley, it comes up a lot, and I think that there's some really powerful ideas kind of baked in here that I'd really like to share. I'm going to try and stay mindful of our time. I rehearsed, and it was like 10 minutes. We could probably go for half an hour. I'm going to try to not do that. Buzzwords. Everybody loves buzzwords. Just kidding. Some of these you've probably seen. Some of these you've probably heard other people on teams from other disciplines talk about. What really kind of brings all of these together? Why are we talking about these in a business context? Empathy is one of my favorites. For a long time, I hear people talking about why empathy is important, but why and how does it fit into the rest of this? What's the point, to summarize it? And I think the point is making things that people want. Seth Godin describes this sort of relationship as who's it for and what's it for, finding that alignment between the people that you're choosing to make something for and the problems that you're choosing to solve for them. Mark Andreessen describes this as product market fit. I think that's an excellent sort of term to take this together. And he will go as far as to say that when you understand this relationship between the people that you're making something for and the problems that you're trying to solve for them, it's almost like the products can be designed for you. It comes out of the understanding of the problems. This also comes from a class at Stanford called something like Business for Electrical Engineers and Computer Scientists. So even us engineers can really benefit from not just, we all know how to make stuff, but who are we making it for and what problem are we solving for them? So I have some quick case studies, nothing too fancy, but I think that there's some little nuggets in here that are really important. Spotify, I love Spotify. Spotify came out of the collapse of Napster, which is really interesting. And as I'm sure you're all aware, music pirating started before Napster and actually continued to increase after Napster collapsed. And the founder of Spotify looked at that situation and said, you know, would even a small, tiny number of the people downloading music illegally be willing to pay a little bit for an easy, legal way to listen to music? And turns out he was very right. I think their valuation as of Wednesday was nearing $17 billion. Slack, another one of my favorite apps. How many of you know that Slack started out of a game studio? Isn't that pretty cool? What happened was they built this game. They built some internal tools to help keep files in sync and things like that. The game didn't do too well, but they decided to take the internal tools that they had developed and spin that out into its own product. I think the nugget here is that you can look for you can look for problems that you are solving for yourself. Other people might have the same problem, and might be looking, you know, you as a maker might be able to take your solution and put it in front of other people. I forgot to mention it about Spotify, but I think the nugget there is that I think when you find a group of people who are solving a problem poorly, such as, or illegally in this case, again, there's people who want a problem to go away, and again, we can craft the solution and put it in front of them to solve that same problem. One personal story, I used to be at a startup, I won't go into too much detail, but I think the main problem that the startup experienced, it's no longer around in the form that it was back then. The problem was that we had built this solution, this app and this product, and it wasn't really something that was built with a certain audience in mind or even with a certain problem in mind. And so what, you know, initially we might have had some clients, but eventually we kind of hit this wall, and I think the issue was finding, you know, starting with the problem would have helped us a lot. To wrap it up, Michael Seibel of Y Combinator, I'm gonna paraphrase one of his stories. If someone's hair was on fire and you handed them a brick, they would probably still try to put it out. Ideally, we'd want to hand them a hose, but the idea is if you can see those fires, especially for a chosen group, a chosen community, people that you have issues or problems in common with, you can still give them a solution and improve that solution over time, but step one is seeing the fire. So I hope that that is something that we can all ask ourselves as we go out and continue to make sense. Thank you.
Thank you, Darren. Q&A. Any more questions?
Do you have a go-to method for actually collecting realistic feedback for your target audience?
Realistic feedback. I think that's a really broad topic.
Well, it's because you were saying like it's important to have empathy for users' problems. Like, how do you actually get those things without actually just ballparking from your own experience?
Yeah, so you definitely need to like get out there in the field. I will say that you don't need to build something necessarily to test that idea, and that's really key. Like, there's a lot that you could learn about the problems that people are willing, for example, to pay to solve by, just doing like market research online, competitive analysis. Are other companies out there solving the same sort of problem? And what might be the deficits in those solutions? And then once kind of you have an understanding there of maybe how many people have those sorts of problems, you can start putting things like paper prototypes, low code prototypes. You can put an ad in front of them. You could start a Kickstarter and see how many people sign up. There's actually a really great book by a group called Strategizer, and they just list, they have this massive poster of like many different things that you could do with like very little money, very limited time, to just kind of put your idea in front of people and see how they respond. And I think really that's the key. Put the idea in front of them, see what happens. I think Eric Ries has summed it up saying, people who learn the fastest win. And so put that idea in front of people and see what happens.
Thank you.
Yeah.
What was that site? You said it was a site?
Eric Ries, he's a writer. Yeah. Lean UX is the book. Cool. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Okay, next up we have Strick with Fuse for Nitros 9.
this microphone last week.
Oh, yeah. No, no, we're gonna down to this.
1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Okay, I forgot the microphone last week. Darn, I was hoping this was going to display better this week, and I had it set up so that it was mirroring. I plugged it in and it quit mirroring, and I can't see it down here anymore. So, speaking of building things that people want, I like to program for the Motorola 6809 8-bit microprocessor from the 1980s. It was used in the Radio Shack color computers. There's an operating system called OS 9 that was also back from the 80s. And the level 2 version of it, or Nitros 9, is the community maintained one. Level 2 lets you have more memory than the 64K that your 6809 can see. And so I've written a bit about how the memory mapping unit works there. And in OS 9, your user process gets 64K of RAM for each user process you've got. And that's pretty amazing on an 8-bit CPU to be able to do that. The graphics screen can have another 64K, and the kernel gets 64K. But that starts to get tight if you have too many devices or if they're doing anything fancy. And so I've written a Fuse file manager. Some of you know Fuse from Linux and Mac OS, and I think even Windows will let you write user-level file systems that run as user processes. So if you write a Fuse file system, your user process gets another 64K to use. And the demo I have here is a TFTP file system. So you can access remote files using trivial file transfer protocol. So the first thing I do is I put the daemon in the background, and that opens up the back end to the TFTP file system. And then if I list /fuse/TFTP/ an IP address and then the name of the file, it's this timestamp is the contents of the file. And then I can show that redirection and all the ordinary things that OS 9 can do with file names, like save it into a file named X and dump the X, and you can see all the bytes are actually there. So this is a project I worked on really for like a year, kind of off and on, but I finally pushed it out over Christmas and New Year's and got it working at least that stable. I need to do a little more work to be able to manage large files. All right.
Cool, thank you very much.
You should use ChatGPT to help you out with that.
You know, ChatGPT kind of has some naive ideas about retro computing. It will write basic code for you, but it's kind of a generic basic and not specific to any individual machines. So I'm not sure how much training material it was able to get. It is a pretty cool thing.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
All right, thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, next up we have Wayne, who's going to be talking about Solid.js.
Eternity later.
Cool.
I love that too much.
Hello, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, cool. Okay, I apologize in advance if any of you heard this talk. It's just that so few people signed up that I felt sad. Plus, Sako needs extra time for his presentation. Okay, so Solid.js. It is a web framework that is competing in the same battleground as, say, React and Vue.
interesting. It's written in JSX, so anyone who has written in React is going to feel right at home. It is really lean. It is around 8 to 12 kilobytes, depending on how much you want to include in it. That includes front-end router and everything. It is really fast. I know it's saying it's slower than vanilla.js, but you can't get faster than vanilla.js. And it is faster than all the current WAS and DOM libraries. In a way that's not like a neck-to-neck race, it's just always ahead. It has all the most current ways of the most modern strategies for serving web apps. It has static generation, server-side rendering, client-side rendering, hydration, islands, and resumability is coming up. And it's perfect for Astro for those who like multi-page apps or anyone who wishes to embed Solid in a certain kind of environment. Okay, so how does reactivity in Solid work? Well, it works pretty well. All the front-end frameworks are basically converging together, where like up top, you have a layer of data primitives that you're allowed to mutate. Then you have a layer of derived data, and finally, you can subscribe components arbitrarily to any part of your data diagram. This is basically how web apps do things for most places. In React, the top layer would just be called hooks, and the second layer would be called memos. Okay, so let's peek at some syntax. If you look at the difference between the React counter and the Solid counter, you're going to notice that they look pretty much just the same, because Solid just uses JSX. There is one slight difference, besides the most basic API difference, the API name difference. The difference is really minor, it's use state versus create signal. But the interesting difference comes down here in how you use it. In React, it's actually really beautiful. To use a hook, you just use count. Count is just a number. It could be the number 7. Very beautiful. In Solid, it's a little bit uglier, but you do get something for this price. In Solid, you have to do a function call. What do you get in return? Well, one thing you get is you get to read your writes. So in React, if you wrote this, this would be a mistake. Up here, this is a natural thing for a beginner to want to do. Because if you mutate your state, don't you want to see the before and the after, just to see if your changes actually are making sense? But in React, you're not allowed to do this. If you update state, the only time you can find that out is in your next render. So within this function, you have no chance ever to find the freshest state. In Solid, however, in exchange for having a slightly uglier syntax of doing a function call, you get the freshest state, always. Okay. Next is the most interesting part of Solid, which is granularity. In React, it's natural to divide up components in the sense of you take the visual real estate of your website and you chop it up in a way that makes sense. And then you assign those to be components. And here we have a whole bunch of stuff that's part of the component. But the problem is that when time updates, should the entire component rerun? How Solid does things is they use a compiler-based approach, much like Svelte, and they say, no, this part of the DOM depends on some parts of the code, and this part of the DOM depends on some other part of the code, and this part of DOM depends on some other part of the code. And so when I mutate the DOM, it does a surgical mutation of just the parts that matter. So here I am, I'm going to increment, and when I mutate the DOM here, it only mutates that element. Solid is even more granular than that. Here I'm going to remove an item from the list. And when I remove the item from the list, despite the fact that I'm basically mapping over the entire list, it also does precise surgical mutations of just those list elements. Okay, and that's it for my Solid talk. Oopsies. Getting started is really, really easy, and if you want to Discord me and chat about web stuff or web architecture stuff, I'm always free to chat. Thank you.
Thank you, Wayne. Any questions?
So what about mobile?
For mobile, unfortunately, Solid doesn't have a real story for that yet, and I don't think it will anytime soon. Like, if you're talking about native mobile, you're still looking at the old classics. React Native, Flutter, Swift, Kotlin. Unfortunately, there's no real replacement for that kind of stuff. I will say one thing. For native environments, I would recommend looking at Rust. I know it's really strange, but I know that I said that Solid is faster than all the Wasm DOM libraries. That's true. But it turns out that for mobile scenarios, Rust GUIs tend to be are basically really close to native performance, and so it looks really good. And it allows you to deploy on desktop and multiple environments simultaneously.
So I don't know much about Rust, but can you use one code for both the mobile as well as the web?
Yes, a lot of Rust frameworks are heading in that direction. The community is very eager in the GUI world. So the current story is there's a race among library authors for multi-platform deployment. So in other words, simultaneously deploy to Wasm DOM, simultaneously deploy to desktop, simultaneously deploy to mobile. So that's what they're trying to go for right now, and the performance is pretty good.
Because I was looking at Flutter, but it looks like Rust is better.
Like Flutter for the web, for whatever reason, is crazy slow, like so terribly slow that I'm surprised that the Flutter team even has enough face to put up like web demos, because when you try their official demos, it is unacceptably slow.
Okay.
Whereas the Wasm DOM actually is pretty slick.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Wayne?
All
All right.
cool.
Thank you
very
Wayne.
much.
All right, and last but not least, we've got Sako talking about Cloudflare.
Yeah. Thanks for saving me.
One eternity later.
Okay. Hello. I'm Sako from Team. I'm working at a company called Gladly as a platform DevOps security engineer. And I wanted to share with you a bit about the security piece, and I'm sure most of you using HTTPS and in the website and in front of the website and what you need to do and so forth. And Cloudflare is one of, I would say, one of the must piece of infrastructure tool. And why we are talking about that? So CAB forum is a certificate authority and browser forum where they come in industrial level and discussing the problems, challenges, and recently they came up with an agreement that to shorten your validity of your certification, make, let's say, for 3 years, and you say and you forget, but that's no longer there, and more they will push to decrease that expiration time of your certificate to be maybe first 2 years, 1 year, and then 3 months. But the good hygiene is to automate it and to make it 2 weeks. So, what's Cloudflare? It has a bunch of functionality. It's like caching to make your website faster, DOS protection if there are any attacks in your website. We will focus on TLS in this part. There is also a lot of balancing and buff pieces. So pretty much if you're in the early stage, it will be out of the box and come with easy configuration. You can use ChatGPT for terraforming it, and so that's all there. So briefly, what's TLS? When you are bringing your website, the client or if you have, let's say, any text that you don't want to go over plain text, it's going to encrypt it. That's what is TLS. TLS 1.3 is still in early stage adoption, but eventually it will replace 1.2. There are few advantages over that. One of them also being performance and more secure, hard to break. So in Cloudflare, when you are putting TLS encryption mode, basically it's between your customers and your website. Yeah, Cloudflare sitting in the middle. So the best case would be to use full stick. It means Cloudflare will encrypt the traffic coming from your user to you, to Cloudflare, then it will decrypt it, and then encrypt again and send to your backend server, which also have a valid certificate, which you can use also Cloudflare, create, and then use on your server side. So that's kind of ideal case you have to have. An edge certificate in between your users and from their browser coming to the Cloudflare. There are few types. Universal is mostly one used, but then there is advanced certificate, which is you can have more customization around that for expiration period and stuff. And it's also an advanced certificate manager. Cloudflare will deal for certificate rotation and so forth. But there are a bit the gotchas there as well that time won't let to speak, but feel free to talk to me after. But the keyless certificate, I will mention that is the one like your private key you will have, while Cloudflare will have won't have that. You will just upload the public key. So, but custom certificate, you will create customly public and private key. You upload Cloudflare and it will take it from there. And what's domain control validation? Once you want to generate for your domain that you have to prove that you own that domain. There are few ways to do it, and probably the email is getting depreciated. Probably you will end up using something DNS, so it means it will give you a TXT token that you will need to go add in your DNS provider. So it seems it will be easier if your DNS provider also is Cloudflare. While it's managing, it will do more automation. But let's say if you have any Route 53 or any other DNS provider, you will need to go and build automation around that. That being said, Cloudflare depreciating is set by the March as a CA provider. So two options you can go. One is Let's Encrypt, which is non-profit, and I'm sure you are using it to generate for you. Well, it's certificate. It gives you only 90 days validity. You can adjust around that. And second one, Google Trust Service, which is high performance, and it gives you more flexibility around that. That being said, don't forget about notification to update or renew your certificate. Thank you.
Any questions?
Can you automatically rotate the key for the certificates?
So here's the thing. If you use the same DNS provider as Cloudflare, it will do it for you. Advanced Certificate Manager, ACM, will do it for you. But if you have, let's say, Route 53 where you have your DNS, you will need to build call API of the Cloudflare.
What is the pricing?
So for Advanced Certificate, there is pricing. I think it's $10 or something. It's also, if you go enterprise and stuff, it comes with that. But Universal is free, the first one.
But then you need to manage the rotation. Okay. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
What exactly is a keyless certificate?
Sorry.
Yeah.
What exactly is a keyless certificate? Is a keyless certificate? Is it the only one?
So here's the thing. The keyless certificate, mostly for the compliance reason, what was happening, because Cloudflare in the middle, it's not really end-to-end encryption. Yeah? It will see it, it will read your data, you'll go through the bot, and then encrypt it and send to you. Like, you have to give your private key to Cloudflare. So for FedRAMP and stuff, the compliance was kind of issue for Cloudflare. They were getting challenged, so that's the approach they came that, hey, you will manage your private key. So the traffic will be end-to-end is your server and your client.
What is the edge certificate? It is the endpoint certificate? Edge certificate.
So edge certificate, think about Cloudflare sitting in the middle between your application and the client. Edge certificate means between Cloudflare and your client, your users. And then you have the backend server where it will be origin certificate, where Cloudflare will talk to your backend server.
question. I'm embarrassed to ask because I don't. It sounds dumb. I think it's because I don't have the experience with cloud services. Let's say, for example, the enterprise and the client, you know, they're working with each other, but they need services instantaneous. For example, like stock trading, right? They need that service instantaneous. So when the client's pushing out, you know, thousands and thousands of calls, right, automatically. I noticed that you had a lot of encryption in there. Encryption, you're sacrificing that instantaneous activity for latency. So is there a lot of latency provided going through Cloudflare?
Here's the thing. Yes. Whatever the short answer is yes, because whatever you do encryption, it will take time. TLS handshake will happen with your client and with your Cloudflare. It will be asymmetric encrypted because you're going through the internet, which is unsecured. So first, to establish this TLS handshake, it will take time, and then it will move to symmetric key once there is a secure channel established. There will be symmetric key where things will be slight. So in the beginning, you will have this slight delay at it, and once both have this shared key, it will be. But still, it will be slower than plain text.
Correct.
But that's you need that because.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So I'd like to add a follow-on question as well. So I guess I don't know a ton about web encryption, but like, what are the most prominent use cases where something like this is critical infrastructure? Like, is this something that every website should have and be using, or are there certain business cases where this is more of a priority?
So in general, everybody has to use HTTPS. If your website is not using, browser will keep alerting you, so it will just move away with your users.
Got it.
It will keep them.
So this is basically standard practice for pretty much all websites.
Not a Cloudflare, but having encrypting the traffic between your website and the user's browser. That's there. Unless you have a static website where you don't pass any information from the cloud, but still the browser will alert you, hey, are you sure you want to go to that website?
Got it.
Unsecured site. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Thanks.
Oh, more questions.
I just want to say something really fast, not a question, sorry. It's about Cloudflare's latency. You were talking about it earlier. I'm actually hosting my app on Cloudflare. I have a server-side rendered app. I'm also using their KD store and their SQLDB. I'm getting like 0.2 seconds time to interactive and 0.2 seconds largest common for ping. So that's faster than Google, the Google homepage.
Thank you.
So they're crazy fast. Getting a 100 on Google Lighthouse scores is now too easy.
And on top of what he said, Cloudflare has fastest DNS resolution. That's one platform used to host your DNSs on Cloudflare. Yeah.
This is not a serious question. Elon Musk was saying that he's going to deprecate DNS. You know what he meant by that?
Sorry, can you?
Elon Musk was saying that he was going to get rid of DLS.
Here's the thing. TLS has earlier version that's not secure. Then he may held that, but TLS 1.3 is the latest one, which is everybody's moving on that. So you can set in Cloudflare as well the minimum TLS version you're gonna support because this is picked up between your browser. Let's say if your browser is early and stuff, it's like what's the minimum level you wanna your application support, so which is configured.
All right, any other questions for Sako? All right, thank you very much, Sako. All right, let's do one more round of applause for all the speakers tonight. All right, just a couple closing notes and then we'll wrap it up. So, the Hacker Dojo was kind enough to facilitate all this. When there's a donation link, you can talk to Ed or Tiana to keep these kinds of events going on a regular basis. Also, if anyone wants to take my role tonight and host their own lightning talks, you can also do that as well. So like I said, talk to Ed and Tiana. And yeah, once again, I'm Kyle, and thank you all for coming out and for participating in the lightning talks this evening.
Thank you.
And don't forget, there's beer in the back.
I would love to host.
Yeah. You want to do the next one?
When's the next one?
Probably next Friday.
Well,
It's every Friday. We're trying to get it on.
we'll talk a little more, yeah.